In our Torah narrative, we are firmly in the wilderness, and our portion begins with a dramatic story of sibling tension as Aaron and Miriam speak out against their brother Moses' wife. "He married a Cushite woman," they exclaimed, and then Miriam is struck with leprosy as punishment. Now, there's some very startling and troubling things about this passage. To begin, both Aaron and Miriam speak out against Moses, but only Miriam, his sister, is harshly punished for it. Aaron gets off leprosy-free, but that's for another sermon. Now, it says that Moses married a Cushite woman, but if you've been paying attention to our story, you would remember that Moses actually married Zipporah, who was the daughter of Jethro, a Midianite priest. So does Moses have two wives? Or does he divorce Zipporah and marry this Cushite woman? Or is Cushite just a curious way of describing Zipporah? These are among the many explanations that the rabbis try to give to justify the discrepancy. But I'm not going to focus on that either. I want to talk about the simple fact that Moses is married to a Cushite woman. Cush is a region south of Ethiopia, also known as Nubia or present-day Sudan. I want you to take a moment and picture the prophet Moses with his long white beard, with staff in arm, and the other arm holding his dark-skinned African wife. Does that image surprise you? American Jews have been raised to believe that interfaith and interracial marriage is a new, modern phenomenon. And generally speaking, in America, until several decades ago, this was true. But here you have Moses, the Moses, married to a Cushite woman all the way back in ancient times. And this intermingling was clearly a reality for most of our 2,000 years of diaspora existence. We Jews have adopted and mixed with the foods, the languages, the music, and yes, even the people of the countries in which we have lived over the centuries. Why do you think that Jews from Ethiopia look so different from Jews from Poland? Or Jews from India looking so different from Jews from Iran or Iraq? We were never a single race or even a single tribe. Since we left Egypt, we have been an Erev Rav, a mixed multitude. And this has happened in America as well. A high intermarriage rate, as well as other factors including adoption and conversion and the immigration of many non-Ashkenazi Jews, have contributed to a completely different ethnic and cultural makeup of the American Jewish community, perhaps more than you can even imagine. Last month, I was at the UJA Federation for the initial report of a groundbreaking census of how many Jews of color exist in the United States and how many there will be in the coming years. I talked about this a little bit at Saturday morning services a couple of weeks ago, but there's not a lot of overlap between our Saturday morning and our Friday night crowd, and I felt this was too important to not share. Now, despite the Jewish community's obsession with population studies, we have never before intentionally counted the Jews of color in our community. This is due in large part to the working assumption that Jews in America are white. But the newest analysis tells us otherwise. The study was commissioned by the Jews of Color Field Building Initiative and carried out by respective sociologists, Dr. Ari Kelman of Stanford and Dr. Aaron Tapper of the University of San Francisco. Their detailed analysis shows that by conservative estimates, the Jews of color represent 12 to 15% of American Jews, and growing. Take that in. It's a stunning statistic. It's 1 out of every 7 Jews. It means that of the approximately 7.4 million Jews in America, about 1 million are Jews of color. That's larger than the Orthodox population in America, for a little context. Now, I'm going to guess that right now you're feeling a little bit skeptical about these numbers. Alana Kaufman, who presented the results of the study, shared that she's often confronted by disbelief. A man came up to me, she said, and said, "I don't believe those numbers. I went to Jewish day schools, and to Jewish camps, and I volunteer at Federation, and I never see Jews of color. Perhaps there's a reason for that. I thought back to our Torah portion and the fact that Aaron and Miriam are speaking out against this Cushite woman without explanation. Why? Perhaps they're upset that Moses didn't marry an Israelite, you might say. But they didn't speak out against Zipporah when he married the Midianite woman. The Torah doesn't exactly tell us what Miriam and Aaron said against this woman of color in their midst. But I can tell you some of the words that I myself and other Jews of color have heard spoken of us in the Jewish community. She's nice, but she's not really one of us. Funny, you don't look Jewish. And for real, this happened in our lobby. Excuse me, are you the nanny? Sometimes the words are not that explicitly offensive. They are the seemingly innocuous questions that we're asked in synagogue, like, so, what brings you here? Or, now where are you from? Or, now where did you learn all that Hebrew? Even when I became a rabbi, I could lead an entire service in Hebrew and do a Devar Torah, and people could still come up to me afterward and ask me, are you Jewish? Questions like these remind us over and over that we're seen as outsiders. It's exhausting to always have to explain ourselves. These are questions that most white Jews are never asked when they walk into a shul, because the assumption is that you're Jewish. Now that you know that 1 in 7 of the Jews in our community are Jews of color, when you walk into any minyan, which is about 10 Jews, you should be making an assumption that at least one of them should be a Jew of color. And if you don't see any Jews of color in that minyan, you should be asking yourself the question, where are they and why aren't they here? If we don't answer this question, there will be some serious ramifications for our Jewish community. The study shows that the next generation of the American Jewish community is rapidly changing. 65% of the people living in multiracial Jewish households are under the age of 45. Jewish demographics are trending along the same lines as US demographic changes. And the implication for that is that in a few decades, the Jewish community, just like the American population, will be a majority people of color. This is already the case in Israel today. It might surprise you. 47% of Israeli Jews are Ashkenazi. The majority are Jews of color from Arab, African, and Asian lands. Now, I imagine this might make some American Jews feel a little uncomfortable. Are we losing or diluting our traditional culture? But I want to remind our community that this is our traditional culture. From diaspora times, all the way back to when Moses married a Cushite woman, right here in our Torah. We were never a single race or ethnicity. Looking Jewish is not what makes up Jewish peoplehood. Instead of seeing this as a threat, we should see our mixed multitudes, this mosaic of the tribes of Israel, as an opportunity and a real blessing. Miriam and Aaron had trouble with this. They were alarmed by this Cushite woman and they spoke out against her. But God came down strong and admonished them for it. It was Moses who was the forgiving one. He prayed for his sister to be healed from her leprosy. He understood that our community needed more forgiveness and openness, more empathy, and more acceptance. Only with those things would we come to the promised land. And that is why Moses is considered our greatest prophet. And he still has so much to teach us today. Amen.